you know, from the shaman here, you can tell that we got to get the energy up, so especially for her son. So all right, so Anthony Rousseau, what can I say? On-field host for the NCAA, right?
Yeah.
Is kind of his claim to fame, is kind of his differentiator, but also he's done a lot of work in this space of doubling down, and the doubling down strategy, I assume, is what we're going to learn about today. And but has spoken and impacted thousands of people over his shorter life than mine, but very, very well. And so we're very much blessed and have an opportunity here to hear what Anthony would like to share with us. So I'm going to invite you to join me in giving Anthony a round of applause as he joins us on.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here.
All right, so I'm going to quickly warn you guys, the lady in the front and myself are on a 10-day juice cleanse, and we're on day 2.
Oh, no.
So I would recommend not speaking to her about food or anything in general. Just I would recommend avoiding it. We have a really nice, intimate room, which is great, and I didn't want to give you a bunch to remember for my intro, but what I do is I'm the MC and on-field host for the NCAA championship. So I'm the Jumbotron guy. I get to have a lot of fun and do that. But in the last, I thought that was going down.
I know.
In the last 9 years, I owned a company called Identity Marketing, which is a staffing firm for brand ambassadors and people that work in the experiential marketing industry, so the people that hand out sodas when you go to festivals and stuff like that. And we were staffing upwards in the neighborhood of 2,000 unique brand ambassadors a year and providing them with temporary work, which was great. But it was about time for me to start following my passions, which in 2016 was the police shooting in Dallas, which is when I started my newest company, which is called #BeTheChange, which is all about creating action. And instead of just creating awareness, and instead of talking on your computers and complaining and stuff, actually looking for what you believe in and actually acting in that. And that's the whole purpose of Be The Change. And if we have time at the end, I'll talk a little bit more about that, because that's truly what I'm passionate about. And then on top of it, I realized my impact was my ability to speak. I've been in front of 10,000 people. I've been in front of 75,000 people at the Georgia Dome. But I was just doing it for fun and entertaining people instead of providing a message. So my message, I realized that I had a lot of support from my mom growing up, and she always told me that I could be anything that I wanted to be. And she's actually seen me speak on College World Series and all the different championships, but she actually hasn't seen me speak on my keynote. She saw me do a really, really horrible version of a stand-up, which was interesting. There was like 7 people in the room. There's nothing worse than an open mic night in New York. Plain and simple, because nobody's paying attention to you. There's no room feedback whatsoever. But she's been always my hardest critic, and she said I was surprisingly funny, which I thought I was actually really funny.
That's a win. That's a win.
So my mom told me I could be anything growing up, just like a good mom would tell you. And I, of course, chose to be an expert in the field of failure. Seems pretty common. You can laugh at me. I'm a failure, and I'm not gonna lie, you guys are all probably failures as well at one time or another. And what I realize that I can do to people is change the mindset of failure. Failure is, we give it a negative stigma, when in all reality, without failing, there is no success, there is no happiness. Mm-hmm. And the concept of the word perfection and perfect is actually, to me, more of a negative term than failure. Perfection is temporary, if you want to use sports as a reference. A perfect game in baseball doesn't last a whole career, it lasts one night. The only positives you get out of that are accolades, people giving you high fives, and warm feelings, and a reason to strive for that again. But your lessons, the only lessons you get out of that are, that felt really, really good. And that concept of striving for perfection, but realizing that's not the whole goal of life, will help you no matter what field you're in. Doesn't matter what sales you work on. Doesn't matter what kind of company you run. A perfect day is a day without lessons. So, I know I've seen a couple of the videos from this group, and a lot of times it's a lot of takeaways, so I wanted to make sure we have some stuff, concrete things that you could take with you, take notes on and stuff like that as we go. So, let's see if this works. I just downloaded this last night, this way to connect with your PowerPoint.
What was it
Says
about
next
failure?
And with the lesson I learned is spacebar. There we go. All right, so the base concepts we're going to learn today is to stop being afraid of failure. You are in good company, meaning every celebrity, every athlete, everybody. I've got some really good examples of failure. What is negative progression? So double down strategy is what I call what I do. And doubling down is based off of something called negative progression that was actually, it's a gambling style. And I was raised by a father that had compulsive gambling addiction. He also was handicapped. And I realized later in life that his method was negative progression, which means, and I'll go through it quickly, it means you double your bet every time you lose, which is pretty dangerous in gambling. But if you look at it in the scheme of life, I realize that's a really positive way. If you're learning from all your losses, you're going to be able to double down and keep coming back. But I'll get into more detail on that. Listen to the universe, and then I'm going to do some takeaways that you guys can write down and leave with you. Let's see, make it work? Nope. All right.
Nice try.
It might all of a sudden reset. We'll see. So I want to change your mindset on failure. So that is Thomas Edison, one of the most famous inventors of all time. And this is going to be one of the most common quotes I'm sure you've all seen before. Thomas Edison took what they say 10,000 different ideations in order to create the light bulb. So they asked him, how did you keep going after you failed all those times? You failed 10,000 times. Why did you keep trying to create the light bulb? He said, I did not fail 10,000 times. I found 10,000 ways that do not work. That's the way you have to look at your day-to-day failures. We could use the word failure because I don't think it's a negative, but a lot of people might say, I don't like the word failure. You're just finding ways that are going to get you to the next sale, that are going to get you to the next element in your life, to the next thing, the next way you find marketing online that will work better. You're going to find different things. Like when you test Facebook ads, they're not always going to work the first time. They're going to work after you've fine-tuned your market and your audience. Because it's not like you just randomly fell on it. It's because you actually analyzed those failures. So that's Thomas Edison. Obviously, a great quote to start. So changing the mindset on failure, it's just ways that you're finding you didn't work in relationships and work and all those different things. So I like to transition from the most famous inventor of all time to, of course, me. I'm adorable right there. And I wanted to make sure that we had a very similar picture. Me, the big similarities between Edison and myself is, in this, for example, I'm holding a light bulb. He created the light bulb. So that's our similarities right there. We like to, find a way to come together. So I've actually had, I mentioned the company that was successful as a 7-figure agency, but before that, I had my own failures. Those failures being 2 businesses that I started. First one was a company called Pride Tags. Great concept, in my opinion. In 2008, 2007 is when I started. I got a small business loan of 6 figures because I wrote a killer business plan. I locked myself in a room for 4 months, took it to a bank. I think it was the 3rd or 4th bank I went to, and also I had the benefit of having a co-signer, or you were already working with the bank, I believe. I don't know, they liked the idea. They thought that I was buying into a franchise. So to say that I wrote a really good business plan would be, to say the least. But what it was Pride Tags is a company that had collegiate dog tags, and it was the concept of being a part of something bigger than yourself. Loved the idea, people loved the idea, and then, as we all know, the recession hit. And I had collegiate licensing, which 3 years before that, if you had collegiate licensing on any product, your company was valued at $1 million because college items were just flying off the rack. People couldn't get enough of collegiate gear. I had Duke, I had UNC, NC State, I had everything in the area that I was from or living in at the time. Unfortunately, recession hit. I wouldn't say that I was squandering money, but I was operating as lean as I thought I could at the time. So bad timing, bad luck, and fact is, money went really quick. So my failures on that I realized very quickly when I was trying to pay my monthly bill, just to pay back the loan, and realized I really didn't have a functioning business at the time. Bad luck and poor spending. So business number 2, after that, I had a really good friend in the Dallas area that was like, move out here. He just got let go, and I've been in the experiential industry before I started Pride Tags and after. So again, experiential, to me, the most effective form of marketing because it's person to person. You're actually getting to relate to the people on a one-by-one level, and it's not just wallpaper because you're forced to receive something or talk to somebody giving you a sample or whatever. So I'm a big fan of experiential marketing. Him and I had been in the industry for years. We were event managers. We did tours together where we'd go across country for Coca-Cola, do different things. And we had the bright idea when he got let go, we're going to start our own marketing company. Sounded like a great idea on paper. Him and I both had great energy, and then we quickly realized it's really hard to get clients when you're competing against your old clients. We were trying to go after the Coca-Colas. We were trying to go after, what other brand? Well, Pepsi's, Coca-Cola, Frito. We were trying to go after the big boys when we're competing against $50 million, $100 million agencies, and we're not even the size of a boutique. Then the next biggest problem was my business partner and I don't know if anybody's ever gone into business with a friend. Anybody? Yeah? How'd it end?
No longer friends.
Well, I think that is that 100% of the people? Yeah. So when you go into business with, I always say it's very similar to having a roommate. You should never be roommates with your best friend. You should never go into business with your best friends. Now, you can have acquaintances that you can go into, like people you kind of knew and you trust, and for some odd reason they end up as the best roommates and best friends and best business partners. This was not the case. So turns out we had two very, very different ways of operating. And what happened was, and this is where identity marketing, my company, came from, is we were identity partners and then became identity marketing. We didn't have options for clients. Our only client at the time was actually the NCAA. And we were doing some of their fan fest. So one of our clients that came to us, we realized the people that respected us in the field, and we actually analyzed what we were doing, or I analyzed what we were doing. The people that respected us were the people we were competing against. So that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. So what I did is I had an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. One of the companies that I worked with said, "Can you guys staff events?" Sure. I don't see why not. Does it pay? Then absolutely. My business partner at the time was like, "We are not a staffing agency. We're a marketing agency." And I said, "We are a whatever makes us money agency." I'm sorry. We got bills to pay. And it started out with six brand ambassadors during the World Series here in Texas. And then that went well, and they go, "Can you staff Super Bowl?" So essentially, the way this went was a little dip my foot in, and then staffing 100 people at a time for 10 straight days. And if anybody knows anything about the Super Bowl, you actually have to get credentials in 3 months before. It's a nightmare. And it's how many people have seen Forrest Gump? Horrible shrimpers until the hurricane. After that, staffing like shrimping was easy. Very easy at that point. So once I got through that with the ice storm that we had in Dallas and all of that, and making sure staff was there every day, it was the worst 10 days of my life, but it forged a company, plain and simple. And my business partner and I had very different ways of doing things. In the world of marketing, you're always on your phone. And I think you know that it's 2019. It's not, people don't understand anymore, like, oh, there's family time. You can still have work-life balance and still keep your phone next to you. Checking a quick text does not mean that you are not spending time with your family. So that was a big lesson that I think he's probably learned over time. But at that point, we split up, and that was the end of that. So after 2 failures, I analyzed when I started identity marketing, which became a seven-figure firm within 18 months, how to spend very lean because I had no money to start at that time. I had a client willing to pay me on a 30-day, net 30. That was it. So 0 money, net 30, got it started. I think the lawsuit, I borrowed $3,000 from my mother, which I paid back very quickly at the time. It was not a good time in 2010, but it all worked out. And again, we were a $1 million company by 2011, and especially by 2012 throughout, until I merged and then got more into Be the Change. So, as funny as this may look, and Mom, you're not quite there yet. You're getting there, but not quite there yet.
Ouch.
I was raised on tough love. It's completely fine. Trust me.
And just so you know, I have fallen, so.
That was a long time. All right. So this is, even though it was kind of a funny slogan, we joke about it. If she learned properly from what got her down to the floor, the whole joke of help, I've fallen and I got up, it's temporary, because guess what? She probably bought the, what was that actually called? Life Alert. Yeah, thank you. Bought the Life Alert, and the next time if she fell, she was all right. She learned from her failure, mistake. It wasn't even a mistake. It's just, it happens. So, I I'm going to go through the good company. Is this any chance? Oh,
It worked.
hey! All right. So I'm going to go through just a few people that obviously you've probably heard before, and you know that you are in good company if you've failed. So I'd like to do this. How many people know that they failed before? Okay.
Today?
Today, in the last hour. Yeah.
At least.
All right. Michael Jordan did make varsity team. Also talking about the concept of perfection. He's considered the greatest athlete of the 20th century. Far from perfect. His shooting percentage was below 40%. So when he had a 9-for-9 start to a game, he was perfect in that moment, but it was very, very temporary. Yeah. All right.
While it lasts.
Stephen King, the book Carrie was actually rejected by 30 publishers, and he actually gave up on it. He was actually going into full-blown depression, and his wife said, "It's a good book, just trust me." It was just nothing like any book people had seen at the time. So he finally came back and decided to, I think he rewrote a piece of it, and that's how it got actually purchased by one of the publishers. Bill Gates, I love his data making machine. So Bill Gates is a dropout. Because he's got faith in his new company. He's going in there at 19 years old, and he shows it to what would be an investor. And the day that he got there, to think that Bill Gates, one of the wealthiest people in the world, went to show his item at the age of 19 years old, and when he pressed go, it didn't work. Shunned from the room.
It was Microsoft. What do you expect?
Yeah. It was windowless at the time. But obviously, with that, he took the data making machine, and instead of just going, "We're a failure, we're done," he rebuilt it and created his own company with funding instead of trying to sell it to somebody else, and it all worked out. Right.
There is something
You got
in your screen.
a pop up there.
Oh, auto update. That's going to be an interesting one to get off. Let's see. That's going to look really little for a second. Let's see. Night, night. All right. Uno momento.
Maybe just join me.
All right. Let's try this one more time. There we go. It should come back on. Maybe. What's the next one on there? Steve Jobs. He has always been a genius, but he was also an asshole. And that is, there is no reason that he should have ever been out of Apple in the first place. And when he did get asked back, he was still kind of a jerk, but he also realized that he had to be a little bit more humble to the people around him. Walt Disney's a great one. If you ever want to, I actually really like the concept of studying failure, maybe because it's my thing. Walt Disney went up and down his whole career. Even when first he had ideas stolen from him, he was fired from Kansas City Star for lack of imagination. And even when he became successful, there was a lot of, we look back and think that Walt Disney was always 100% a success. When he opened Disneyland for the first time, it was a flop. It was they thought it was the biggest waste of money in history. People didn't come, things didn't work, and it was a nightmare. So above and beyond just the beginning of his career, all throughout he pushed the boundaries of failure, which is again things I stress to entrepreneurs and even stress to people that work for other companies, because when you work for somebody else, if you could push the boundaries and realize you are going to fail and try to do something that nobody else is going to do, eventually you're going to do something that the person next to you doesn't. So Walt Disney's a good one. Oprah Winfrey fired from Chicago News. They told her she was unfit for TV, and now she has her own network. Let's think about that one for a second. Sometimes it's all about not listening to people. Henry Ford's my favorite because it's right around my age. He started Detroit Automotive Company at 36. He had funding from the Dodge brothers. A lot of people don't know that. He couldn't pay back the Dodge brothers' initial loans, and a part of it was his company wasn't working because the Dodge brothers were in his ear. They were not silent partners. He had a vision. He believed in his vision. And after he failed with them, at the age of 40, started Ford Motor Company by a financial backer that decided to not meddle. He pitched himself to a way that said, "Let me do this my way." And of course, Ford Motor Company became Ford. Let's see, Vera Wang, this is a good one. Olympic figure skater. She failed to make the Olympic team and then got a job at Vogue. Within 1 year, she was an assistant editor. let's see, no, she was assistant, then she got promoted to senior editor. You would assume quickly on the rise, 15 years later, it was her turn to become the editor-in-chief, and also due to the timing, it was a male-dominated profession, even in fashion at the time. She got passed over, and instead of just beating herself up, she goes, it's my time. And she realized that was time to leave what she was doing. That's kind of the concept I have when I say when doubling down goes wrong, when it's time to leave and try something new. And obviously, nobody would be able to go to a wedding without Vera Wang. All right. Power of failure, as we just covered, there is no great success without struggle. Now I'm going to do really quick on negative progression. So I'm going to try to get out of your way so you can see this.
There's no winning.
Yep, I got it. Trust me. All right. So negative progression. My dad was a compulsive gambler. And his style was, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to show you how it works, called negative progression or the Nightingale system. So really simply, so you can see how it works in gambling, and I'm going to really quick stress, bad for gambling, good for life. Bad for, can we all say it? Bad for gambling, good for life. Bad for gambling, good for, we're done. Okay, we're good. All right. So let's just assume that we've got an original bet of $10, so we're doing everything in increments of 10. So you do your original bet, you win. You have $20, you just put that in your pocket. Pretend like that didn't happen. Once you win, you go back to your initial bet, which is $10. So, $10, you lose. You're now down 10, which means you bet $20. You lose again. That means you're down $30 because you've lost the 20 and the 10. So that means you're going to double your bet again to 40. 40. You lose again, that means 30 plus 40, you're 70 down. So really the only way you just have to think about it is you double the bet that you just had. So if you just bet 40, what do you bet this time? 80. Bet 80. Lost again. Things are getting hairy real quick. But now you have to go $160 in. You've already lost $150, so technically you're $310 out on the table at this point. Not good. But if you win, it's weird. You don't go back to even. It's actually mathematically interesting because you then are $10 up. So no matter how many times you lose, I know I sped through that, no matter how many times you lose, you're always going to end up the initial bet ahead. So the concept that we have in life of brush yourself off again and get back up is actually is empty. It's not a fully thought out method. Brushing yourself off and getting back up is only half the battle, because if you keep doing that, think of it in the world of boxing. If you got hit by a left hook and you get knocked down and you go down to the ground and you can't get back up again, or you get back up again, and you don't think about what happened, you go right back in, you're going to get hit and knocked back down the exact same way you did before. So instead of just brushing yourself off, brush yourself off and think about it and know that you want to avoid that left hook when you come back around. So in negative progression, the concept is if you're doubling your bet, doubling your thought process, no matter how many times you fail, you are going to end up ahead. If you don't do that, you just keep busting your head against a wall, you could lose 6 times in a row, or fail 6 times in a row, or not get that sale 6 times in a row, and you're setting yourself up for when you do get that sale, you're still 6 games back, 5 games back, whatever it might be. Whereas if you're putting everything into it, you fortunately might be able to put yourself ahead of where you started. All right. One more time. Bad for gambling?
Bad for gambling.
Good for life. This one I typically say is I refer to it as a client, but I will be honest, the person is in this room that I actually base this story off of. Listen to the universe. I firmly believe the universe is conspiring to help all of us, and positive people know that. If you're struggling at work, just be positive and realize that if you look for the signs of things coming to you, they're going to present themselves. So there's a couple books called The Go-Giver and The Alchemist that I always suggest. If you've never read them, I say they're super short. They'll literally take 3 days, 4 days if you read them straight, or you could do it in a week with just reading 15, 20 pages a day. The concepts are that there is breadcrumbs being left by the universe all the way around. And my philosophy on this goes back to how I presented one of these books to somebody, and I realized by the time that she was hearing my words, I was being an asshole. I was saying, read the damn book. Like, and and she was saying, yeah, she's right here, sorry. So, and the response back was, you know, it is a good, I finally started it, it's good, I get it, but you weren't presenting it to me in the right way. And I thought about it for a second, and I realized, yeah, I wasn't at that point. But there's a package. So say somebody's trying to give you a present, and they give you a present, and it's perfectly wrapped, and it's got a bow on it, and you hand it over, and I don't know why I'm still holding this, and it looks perfect, but you're gently handing it to them, and they push it away. And then the next time you hand it to them, it's got a little damage from that push, and each time that package is coming to you, it keeps getting more and more damage because you're pushing it away. And finally, if you ever actually receive it, that package may look like it's been beat to hell, but at the end of the day, the gift that's on the inside didn't change. All that changed was the wrapping paper. So sometimes they come in different methods. Some people are going to be assholes, but if you hear the right thing, you go, oh, what he said was good, he's just a dick. Simple as that. And sometimes it might be your own fault that it got to that point. Not happy with me right now. Anyways, read those books. Tools for doubling down. So these are me.
Who's the author of The Alchemist?
The Alchemist, Coehlo is the last name, isn't it?
Oh, Coelho.
Coelho.
C-O-E.
H-L-O. Yeah.
Not
Bob
C-O-E-L-L-H-O.
Berg wrote the Grow.
Bob Berg. Yeah. Yes. Correct.
I think it's C-O-E-L-L-H-O, but I could be.
All right. Let me try to give you guys some takeaways before we get out of here. So, tools for doubling down. Always have a plan. Create structure. Analyze your failures. Remember that your words matters, your health matters, and when doubling down goes wrong. And at the end of the day, be limitless. So, I'm going to go through these real quick. Always have a plan. This is the best advice I'd ever received. I was actually at a wedding when I was 23 years old. This is 22 years old. I was best man. I was co-best man. And I'm going to tell you, there is the art of pickup is the exact same across the board, whether you're trying to flirt with a girl, a guy, or a business. Plain and simple. So having a plan is, from a strategic purpose, one of the most important things you can do. I was told I was about to go back to the bar and order a drink, and the co-best man, who was in his early 30s, gorgeous wife, he was that guy. Always on, everybody loved him, and he grabbed my arm as I was like, I'm going to go flirt with the bartender, and he's like, what are you going to say? I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to just say what's up. I don't know what's going on. I have no idea. And he's like, sit down. And for some odd reason, this one conversation resonated with me for the rest of my life, and I realized it had nothing to do with that bartender. It had to do with strategically putting yourself in the right position, and when you do, make sure you have the right things to say. So that can be looked at in several ways. There was another gentleman I know that actually wanted Les Brown to be his mentor, and he researched different events that he was going to be at, and he knew he was going to have to spend money to see him speak. But he spent money at the right event, to where he knew there was a after-hours session where they could actually have access, and he ended up getting to meet him and ended up becoming a contact. I don't know about mentor, but a contact. He actually got to have a one-on-one with him, which strategically, that's huge. In the world of, if you're, what's that?
Development.
Personal development, that's huge. Less is huge, but in the world of anything that you're working on, what did you say you did again? I'm sorry.
Personal image.
Personal image. So if there's a certain client, or say you have a client that wants to meet somebody or change whatever it might be, you actually are going to do your homework and actually find a plan where you can get those two together.
Actually, I teach them how to dress so they attract
Correct.
the person that they would want to spend time with.
Exactly. So that's part of having the plan. So different elements that you put in. People like you that can help them once they get face-to-face with somebody, they're ready to go. Or once they get in the room, they're creating that attention. So it's all different elements and different ways of creating a plan. And also, once you have that, you need to learn how to parlay it. And you need to learn how to make that success not a one-time success. Be prepared to know when it goes well. Don't just crap your britches and, and have it end right there. All right. Failure to success. Build your... The britches comment? Is that the... Yeah. I don't know. She says britches. I got it from her. She's from middle Missouri. Failure to success. Build your foundation. Create a structure. So there's a quote from First Man. We need to fail down here so we don't fail up there. A couple people, one of the guys I'm working with on my personal coaching right now, he is making the transition to real estate from the medical field. And he has the freedom and the opportunity where he can dip his toes in on one side or the other. But he sent me, he's like, can you send this to your contacts in Minnesota? Say that new real estate agent. At the time when he sent it, didn't know what firm he was working for, thought he knew, wasn't sure yet, hadn't made the full decisions. We've been talking now, we've been coaching each other for 2 months, and he actually now is decided where he's working. He almost left to go to do Berkshire instead, which it would have been really confusing if I sent that to my friends and had to send another email. So the structure wasn't there yet, and he had to realize, he still has to realize if this is the right profession. And he's making the switch slowly because he's got a passion for it and he wants to get out of the medical field. But if he's going to fail, he wants to know how failure feels. Because that was the last call him and I actually just had recently was, what's going to happen? How do I know that I'm being successful? And I said, not when you sell a house, but when you fail on a couple sales and realize that this is still what you want to be doing. That's when you know. So you're going to have to fail so you know that it's going to work up there. For example, landing on the moon. Let's see. Let's skip that. Perception is reality. That's another way when you're building your business or building your clientele per se. I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and there was a hip hop night at a bar that I was going to, and I was with my friend Les, and we were watching the stage, and it was the most confusing thing. And they were about to have a really big Latin act come on later that night, but the opening act turned out he was the DJ and the rapper, and instead of just starting to play, which would have been my recommendation, he literally introduced himself from one side of the stage. He's like, "Where my ladies at? What's going on, y'all?" And then he goes, "I'd like you to put your hands together for the man, the myth, the legend, Snoop Dogg," or whatever his name was. And he walked 2 steps over and went, "What's up, ladies?" It was the most embarrassing thing I have ever seen in my whole entire life, and everybody just looked at each other. So the concept behind that is perception is reality. He looked like a dipshit. So that's not going to go very far in the grand scheme of things. Now, if he did end up making it, I'm going to go out on a limb and say he got noticed on a night where he didn't introduce himself. Because maybe somebody told him that's not the right way. So as you're building your business, as you're building your clientele, always don't lie, but create a perception of strength. Credibility. If you are new in new businesses or new to a new industry, and I'm sure when you started making the transition over, you had to build credibility. You didn't want to lie, but you did want to make people think that you knew what you were talking about, even if you didn't. I didn't know anything about staffing. I'm not going to lie. I just figured I got to get 100 people in one place at one time, and we're going to make that work somehow. So, pretend like you've been there before, even though you haven't. Steps of analyzing a failure. Identify what did you fail on? What was the cause of the failure? Is it something you did? Is it something that could be fixed? Or is it something that you should scrap and that's the time you dust yourself off and get back up and come back in? There is those times. So when you analyze your failure, I like the concept of something called a post-mortem. A lot of people don't do that. A lot of people hate the idea of their failures and they don't actually look to see what happened. So if you have a client that decided they didn't want to go with you, maybe they were still very friendly, use that and say, honestly, I would love to have your business at a later date. Can I just ask what it was? Maybe they'll know that it's price. Maybe they'll be honest and say, I tried getting a hold of you at 7 o'clock and I needed to make a decision. And then you know what? I do need to just keep my phone on me. So analyze what got you there in the first place, what caused you to not get the sale, not get you the person to sign up for what you needed them to do. Didn't sign up for services. Find that out. Use that post-mortem and use it. And don't get beat up by failures. Everybody's got bad weeks. Everybody's got bad days. Who said they were having a really bad day today? Was it? Yeah, okay, got it. You'll be fine at the end of the day. You know that. You've been there before. It happens.
Yes, sir.
Failure. Yesterday.
And I'm still standing.
Still standing. So as we all know, failure hurts. Failure sucks. Failure in life, failure in relationships, failure in business, it all hurts. But what hurts more is when you don't learn anything from it.
It hurts more when you don't try.
When you don't try, and when you don't try to learn from those mistakes. It's like, does anybody have kids?
Oh, yeah.
5 kids? So if the first one sucked, you got rid of it and got a new one, right? You learn. You just toss
They
it
kept coming back.
Yeah. So weird. Even parenting, you change your parenting. Steps to responding to a failure. Make sure changes are in place. Take action. Do not sulk, as I just said. And also remember that we are human. So I'm going to give one case study of my own where I analyzed my failure and refused to ever make that mistake again. Also realizing that it might happen. I was, as I said, on-field host for the College World Series. My lesson here was reading between the lines. So I looked at David Price. I had to interview him when Vanderbilt was in the College World Series, and I had to do a 2-minute interview on the field. And I said, I had 3 questions lined up. I've been doing this forever, had no problems. I do my quick research. He was 11-1 his senior year of college. He was the best pitcher in college baseball. Thought, cool, this is going to be a perfect interview. I had 2 questions that were great, and the third question, I didn't really mean to ask it, but I still didn't think it would be a danger zone question. I said, it's a lot of these players could be their last game on the field in college baseball. Do you have any, instead of saying advice, which is what I was going for, advice for later, I said, what memories do you have from your last game in college baseball? Dave Price is 6'4", 6'5", towering over me, and for the first time ever, I made a true mistake. Because he looked at me and goes, are you really asking me that question? I'm also in the Vanderbilt section at the time with hundreds of angry fans in that section. I did not know, you don't see that there. He gave up a home run, a walk-off home run during the regionals or super regionals to a Michigan player to end their season. And he came in relief, and it should have never happened, and that was probably the worst moment, and has probably continued to plague him to this day because he was a horrible postseason pitcher up until last year. So I got blown up on Twitter by people in the stands. When I walked up the walkway, I literally got yelled at. There was a 70-year-old woman that told me to do my effing research and got in my face, and that was horrible. This is as bad as it can get. So Twitter, people got mad at me on there. And then David Price actually started replying this guy's an idiot. I have no idea. So I, of course, reached out to him. He actually ended up being really nice, but he was wondering what did I actually mean to ask. And I just was I was just trying to ask about your last game. We ended up saying, go Tigers, happy ending there. And what I learned from it was to not make that mistake again, to do my research and to check, like in the movie Wedding Crashers, make sure they have a heartbeat. Never commit yourself to a relative until you know they have a heartbeat. In that case, I make sure to do that. I just interviewed Rafael Palmeiro recently, one of the greatest hitters of all time. I did a little research. Instead of introducing him as Hall of Famer Rafael Palmeiro, I made sure not to say that. And this, 3 years before, was playing in my mind of not to make that same mistake again. When I got back up to the booth, the producer was like, you got to, it's cool having a Hall of Famer there. I'm like, thank God you didn't say that in my year before I got started. Because that'd be a huge deal, because of the steroid thing, he never made it in. You got it. Okay. All right, David Price ended up being a perfect example himself. He's 147 and 77, great pitcher, great major league pitcher. 9 postseason starts before 2018, and he was 2-8. So he clearly never got that out of his head from his last game in college baseball. However, finally something changed. I don't know. I'm not in his head, but clearly he did something different. He learned from all those mistakes. When he had 3 wins, 1 loss, and was not the MVP, but they won the World Series last year. So, or was that last year, 2 years ago? Last year. Clearly corrected his wrongs. All right. Just about to wrap up. Words are huge. If you're realizing something's not working out well in life, or well in business, well in whatever, power in your words. I'm a firm believer in the concept of vibration and energy, and if things aren't going your way and it's continual and you don't know what you're doing wrong, change things up by changing your words. Good book I know you're writing down books. Words and Water by Masaru Emoto. Talks a lot about the power of words and where our bodies are made of 60% water. So obviously there's some kind of correlation, and he actually, by the words that he uses, can actually change the crystalline figures as they get frozen. Pretty cool stuff. Change your words, start your day out differently, start your day with affirmations. I'm a very self-deprecating person, and I still try to find a way to avoid, especially when things are going bad, to call myself, oh, idiot, stuff like that. Change your positivity levels. Let's see, pay attention to your health. That's why I'm doing a juice cleanse right now. He's doing his 10 push-up challenge. Health is huge, and as more successful people get, sometimes you have your steak dinners, you have your clients you go out with, and next thing you know, 50 pounds later and heart conditions later, at one point your body is going to stop. So, when doubling down goes wrong, I've kind of already covered that. Learn when you see an opportunity to shift, when you see that things aren't going right, shift. We weren't meant to be a marketing agency. We were meant to be a staffing agency. Let's see. I did a webinar, and one of the guys asked me, he's like, "When do I? This business I'm in right now, when do I know that this is time for me to get out of it if it's no longer successful?" And I said simply, when you wake up in the morning, day after day, and realize that you're unhappy and you're failures. If it's literally getting to the point where you would rather be working 9 to 5 for somebody who's a business owner, or if you would rather be working just for a different company, whatever it might be, when that is your morning concept, get out. When doubling down goes wrong. And lastly, don't give yourself a limit. Fleas are in a little canister. If you put fleas in a canister and you put the lid on top, they bounce up and down, and they keep thinking they can get out. They can keep thinking they can get out. However, at the end of the day, when you actually unscrew the lid, once they've been bouncing up and down, they won't even try to get out anymore. Don't let yourself be conditioned to that. Always push past failure. And yeah, there's examples of that you can see. If you don't push yourself to failure, you're in trouble. Blockbuster is a perfect example. I think we all know what happened there. And then last thing I'm going to say, the dress is my perfect example on how to read consumers. So takeaway for consumers, and the woman last week was wearing a blue and black dress that literally looked like this dress. So to end it right here, first off, what color do you see when you see this dress? How many people see white and gold? Are you kidding me? Okay, nobody sees white and gold in this room. Everybody sees blue and black, right?
Yeah, correct.
Blue and black.
It's amazing. Okay, I'm being dead serious. I see white and gold. And it's usually about a 40%, 60% split. The concept behind this is, I thought you saw white and gold. You lied.
No,
you
I see blue and black.
The concept behind this is every consumer is different. Everybody sees things from a different angle. That's how I feel about Be the Change and the political aspect behind it. Just recognize everybody is different. That's it. Thank you guys very much.
Awesome job. Thank you, Anthony.
Thanks, Dave.
That was great. Now, how many takeaways did you get from that?
A lot.
I mean, like a million, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad it's recorded. I'm always thankful when somebody like Anthony gets